Fermatevi al tavolo perché abbiamo già in collegamento Ronald Cohen e quindi assistiamo all'intervento. Se la regia volesse farlo partire subito così non perdiamo un solo secondo.
Can you see me?
Good morning. Yeah, good morning.
Can you see?
Yes, you speak.
Yeah. Can you see me and can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So it's a great pleasure to be with you, even though I have to do it by video conference from New York. And thank you very much to Confindustria and San Patrignano for taking the initiative to organize this meeting. And I have been asked as chairman of the task force set up by the G8 to explain what the conclusions of our report contain for all our attempts to deal with social issues. So one of the starting points for this whole effort around impact investment is the realization that whereas we have been able to harness entrepreneurship, innovation, and capital to tackle business issues, and it's brought about a fantastic technological revolution in recent years, when it comes, as we just heard from Roger, if I may call you Roger, it is a real challenge for those who are trying to improve the lives of others to access capital, to innovate, and to be entrepreneurial. And there has been nothing short of a revolution in recent years, as we have begun to realize that you can actually measure social performance. You can measure an improvement in the standard of education, you can measure an improvement in dropout rates from school, you can measure the number of homeless people, you can measure an improvement in the number of young prisoners who go back to prison. And this has given us a new tool. It's given us the tool of connecting a social performance to a financial return. And that enables a social entrepreneur, whether it's a social entrepreneur leading a not-for-profit or a social entrepreneur leading a for-profit business that has a social mission, to access capital markets in the same way that businesses that have sought to maximize profit have done in the past. Putting it very simply, it begins to allow people to do good as they do well. And if you take into account that we live in a period, as we heard from Nicholas Hazard and I'm sure many other speakers earlier in this conference, the fact that governments really don't have the resources to tackle social issues that are becoming increasingly deeply ingrained, that are spreading out instead of restricting in terms of their influence on the lives of people and on our society. If you take into account that there's a generation of young people and of older people, such as myself, who have a desire to help tackle issues that blight the lives of others, and if you take into account that there is a desire on the part of investors who want to achieve something positive from a social point of view or an environmental point of view with the investments they make. There are $45 trillion in investors' coffers who have subscribed to the United Nations Principle for Responsible Investment, just as an indication. If you take all of these things together and you say there are now new tools that enable us to access capital markets, latent entrepreneurial skills, and the innovation that can be unleashed by mechanisms where everything is not prescribed as government contracts, but government pays according to the outcomes that are achieved, then you realize that we really are on the brink of a revolution in the way that we tackle social issues. And if you take it from a historic point of view, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that in the 19th century, investors talked about financial return. In the 20th century, they talked about risk and return. And in the 21st century, we're going to talk about risk, return, and impact. And that is a major change in mindset. And the work of the task force has shown through the 200 people across the world, including in Italy very ably, who have been involved in sharing their experience through national advisory boards and working groups, we can see that there is scope throughout the world for using these new methods, that countries such as Italy and France have led in specific aspects of this field, and other countries such as the UK and the United States and Canada have led in different aspects. And when you blend all of these elements together, you come to the realization that there is a compelling case for saying that impact investment can have a major influence on people's lives for the good. Now, I'm here in New York, and the subject is on the agenda of many meetings in the way that it was not before. You can see people beginning to calculate the cost of tackling a social issue versus the cost to government of incurring that social issue. So in the UK, for instance, the government has already put on the web the cost of 640 social issues. Not-for-profits are now able to calculate that they can prevent a young person from going back to jail for £7,000, while the cost to the government of putting a young person in jail is £22,000, just the cost of paying for imprisonment, let alone the economic cost of having somebody who leads an unproductive life subsequently. And we begin, therefore, to create the opportunity for those who want to help others to come up with innovative approaches and to raise the finance for doing so. Now, how big can this get? We have a chapter in our report which is called The First Trillion. We think this can get extremely big. We think that it can have a similar impact to the impact of the tech revolution on our lives. And we think that the generation of social entrepreneurs, which is following the generation of tech entrepreneurs, will bring innovation in its wake that we can no more contemplate than we were able to contemplate the tech revolution. One important conclusion of our work is that if we want this to happen, then governments have to play an important enabling role. It is very difficult to create an ecosystem to support impact investment without government playing that role. Because government is required at the level of companies that want to lock in their social mission. They require perhaps new corporate forms in order to be able both to make a profit and to achieve a mission. Government action is required at the level of investors. In Italy, you have huge banking foundations. The fiduciary duties of trustees of foundations such as those across the world are defined in strictly financial terms today. Instead of saying that the fiduciary duty of a trustee of a foundation is to achieve an acceptable return, which is a combination of financial and social. And in the UK, the Law Commission has just made recommendations now that legislation should be introduced in the UK in order to allow that. Now, there are trillions in charitable foundations across the world today. If you get a change in the definition of fiduciary duties, you can begin to go in the direction of matching the amount that is being given away philanthropically each year through impact investment, where the money comes back and gets reinvested. So both at the level of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial organizations and at the level of investors, governments need to act. They also need to act because governments are the primary purchasers of social services. Often they provide it themselves, but we can see a trend across the world, which is described in the report, in government contracting out to not-for-profits for the provision of services. And if government wants to bring this revolution around, then government needs to begin to change the mindset away from fee-for-service, where everything is prescribed in the provision of social services, to pay-for-success, where government pays according to the outcomes achieved and enables the organizations delivering the services to innovate in delivering that outcome. So I hope that this gives you a sense of the report and its conclusions. All of us who have worked with the task force, 200 of us across the world, are convinced that this provides a major way of improving lives across the world. And we view ourselves as the vanguard of a revolution in trying to achieve this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Bye. Scusate, mi dicono che in